we'll get this started. Ignore that first slide. And also ignore that too. Computers. Welcome to Getting Started with Arduino Johnny 5. I'm Matt Webb. I'm a front-end engineer at Craftsy. You can reach me on GitHub, Twitter. There's also a repo link in this presentation. I'll tweet it out after, when I think about it afterwards. Also on that repo, I'm currently still building up the README. In the README, we'll have a bunch of resources on tutorials, where to buy your hardware, all the little things that you may want to know that I spent many, many hours finding and failing at. So, what we're going to be covering. What's an Arduino? What hardware basics you should know before you really get started into it. What Johnny 5 is. Setting up Johnny 5 with an Arduino. Demos. Pray to God that they work. They worked 5 minutes ago, so probably not anymore. Cool story, bro. We'll talk about what you can actually do with this afterwards, because I'm only going to be really showing you fundamentals and basic components. And cool, who's my dealer? Wouldn't you like to know? So what is an Arduino? It's an open source microcontroller board. It has an IDE for writing the software for the board, which is completely awful, and we will talk about that later and how to get off of it. It uses a simplified version of C++. There's roughly 22 plus flavors of Arduino, so it's kind of like take your pick and you can just keep going for days with it, or years actually. And also I kind of recommend, when getting started with Arduino, start with an Uno or using the SparkFun's Red board, which is also an Uno, but it's their own design. It's just kind of a simplified, dumbed down version of it. It's really good for just getting started. So hardware. What should I learn? And probably learn how fucking magnets work. All right, so what hardware basics should you end up learning? So you want to get an electronics primer going. You want to learn the basic hardware components and their purpose. Like start learning what a resistor does, what motors and relays do, step motors. I mean, it keeps going on and on, but I mean, when you start learning those base components, like you understand a resistor. I mean, there's many different resistors and what they actually resist, but I mean, that's exactly what it does. It resists how much electricity is going to that component. And you'll need that so you don't actually fry stuff, and that's actually pretty important, as I found out pretty quickly. I fried 3 boards before this. How to use a breadboard. Breadboard is going to be your best friend, especially when prototyping. Prototyping, you don't want to solder things because desoldering sucks. It's actually really easy. You pretty much plug power and ground into the rails, and it powers like each strip, and it's pretty easy to plug and play. There's plenty of videos. I'll link a really good video to how it actually works in the docs. Soldering, as I mentioned, actually soldering is a lot of fun. It's actually really easy. The only thing is you want to make sure before you solder it, you know that's exactly where it's going to go, because learning to desolder is awful. It is very hard. It's just not a really easy skill to manage. Multimeter. You can get one of these for like 20 bucks. I spent one for like 50, and it's actually got a lot more little tools into it, but it's really good for finding out which wires actually connect to each other so you can figure out what's going to be your closed loop. And you can also figure out, like, is it getting the right amount of current? Is it getting too many volts? Is it getting too much power, not enough power? That's something I had to learn last week because something didn't work. So what is Johnny 5? Johnny 5 is an open source JavaScript robotics framework. It was started by Rick Waldron in 2012, who's a developer. He's an open web developer at Bookup, I think is how it's pronounced. Pretty much his job is to mess with electronics and JavaScript, which can't blame. That's a pretty awesome job. It uses the Fermata protocol, which basically all that is you flash the firmware on the Arduino board, and Fermata is just a protocol to actually communicate with your computer to the Arduino board. It's maintained by a lot of, it's open source, so there's lots of developers working on it, and they have probably one of the coolest communities I've ever witnessed, and I've been in many different communities. It's actually quite amazing. And I'll actually get into that a little bit. Actually, the next slide will have some about it. So why Johnny 5? There's a lot of different frameworks you can actually use. You can actually program in Rails if you really want to with Arduino. There's also one for Python and a few others I can't think off the top of my head. But right now, if you were to use Arduino, you have to compile C, which I started learning C, and that was awful. I didn't quite enjoy it. So you don't have to compile. It's running Node. So all you got to do is Node, whatever your JavaScript file is, boom, it's running. You can also use the REPL interface on the Node side, which allows you to, like, if you passed in, let's say, the LED, you could actually show, oh, I'm not sure what this LED is supposed to do, and you type in LED, and one of the command functions that Johnny 5 has, like, stop, like you want it to stop blinking. You can do that right in the command line. You don't have to recompile. You don't have to do any of that, so it's really good for experimenting, too. Asynchronous equals handy. It's really awesome to be able to send your component signals while receiving feedback at the same time. So also, Atwood's law, any application that's going to be, that can be made in JavaScript, eventually will be, so why fight it? Also, JavaScript. Fuck yeah. So this is what I was talking about, why the community is so freaking awesome. They have a Gitter, which if anyone hasn't been on Gitter, it's basically Slack using your GitHub account. And I went on there. This was my very first post onto here. I immediately said, hey, has anyone tried hooking up a Nintendo DS touchscreen to an Arduino using Johnny 5? And I edited this a bit because it was many, many days of people giving me replies of ideas they had. No one's actually done it. And then Rick Waldron actually replied back. He goes, I actually bought one, so it's on the way, and I'll figure it out for you. So he didn't figure it out until 2 days before this presentation. I started attempting it. It was not as easy as it looked. But that's great. They're super noob friendly. No one ever judges you. I've asked some really, really dumb questions, and they're like, oh, yeah, it's this. So their community is amazing. So setting up Johnny 5, part 1. This is the setup you're going to have to do for a new board. Once you set it up for that board, you don't have to do this again, so don't worry. And it's actually it's really easy. So you got to download the Arduino IDE, which is awful. You connect your Arduino via USB to your computer, launch that IDE, open up the format sketch, and you can follow the file and stuff when you actually open it up. And you select the standard Formata. So there's many different versions of the Formata firmware, and the standard one is, I mean, it's just pretty plain simple. It's what everyone does to get started. There's like the advanced ones, which adds more support for more additional advanced components like step motors. So once you've done that, you select your Arduino board, which most likely if you're just getting started, you're going to use the Arduino Uno, which if you also have the SparkFun red board, it's the same board. Select your port, which usually it's already selected. If you have a bunch of crap connected to your computer, it gets confused, but if you just have the one Arduino board, it usually figures it out for you. Upload the program. It's just file upload. That does the upload to the Arduino and flashes the firmware on there with the new Formata. Then close the Arduino IDE, kill it with fire, and you'll never have to use it again. So open up something cool like Atom or Sublime, whatever you want to use. Open up your terminal, do your install for Node.js, like most of us probably already have. Make your new project, make your new package JSON, and do the install for Johnny 5. That is the, I mean, once you got the board set up, it's pretty easy to start getting Johnny 5 hooked up. So, moment of truth. The demos. And let's hope it doesn't end like that. All right, so demos. So here's Hello World. I mean, this is very basic stuff. We have the new, we're requiring in Johnny 5. We have the new new instantiation. Yeah?
Sorry,
okay.
bump that up a little bit, make it a little larger.
Make what a little larger? The font?
Just zoom it in a little bit more.
How do we do that? I've never actually had to zoom in on a slide. Yeah, it's a browser. It's fighting. It's fighting. Wait. Okay. So we're requiring in Johnny 5. This is a new instance of the board. When the board is ready, you'll see it in your command line because you'll run like node hello world.js. It'll start saying, cool, it's connected, it's ready. We're telling it, here's the LED, it's connected to pin 11. On the boards, it actually tells you what pins are what. So it makes it very easy. In the API, there's many different ways to control the LEDs, but I'm just going with a basic blink. Just going to tell it every 500 milliseconds, blink. And this this is how we inject it into REPL of Node. This allows me to start messing with it live in the command line without actually having to rebuild the server every time. Let's see what I can say. So this is the layout. All it is here's the LED, this is the ground, and this is pin 11. It's really easy, it's simple. On LEDs, there's a flat side on the LED. That means that side's the ground. What's that? Yeah. You talking about the PWM? So, yeah, that's in my slide. I'm getting to it. I did that because I only had one board that wasn't fried at this time, and it's for another thing. It's for the force sensor. So that's why I did that on there. Otherwise, you could put it on a different digital pin, which just, you basically turn it on and off. So I did this just in case this didn't work, so. Live coding. So we just do node, hello world JS, and for the love of God, I hope that LED starts blinking. Give it a minute. Okay, there it goes. There it goes. It is blinking, if anyone can see that. It blinks. So what makes this really nice is we are able to say, now we're in the REPL, we should be able to say LED.stop. Cool, it stopped. So if we did LED.brightness, it only goes to 255, so no, we won't do that. See what you're doing? So it's at 1,000, it's roughly at about 45%. So if we did also, let's say, LED.stop, that's just so we take away the brightness. And then if we do like LED, should blink quite rapidly. Yay, amazing. Oh, whoops. All right, next one. We got button. So it makes it even cooler, right? So all we're doing is we're adding a button, and the button is just going to control the LED. So we're just making new vars for the button and LED outside of the board ready listen. We're hooking up the LED. We got the button, which is on pin 2, which it's going to be long if I try and explain how breadboard works, but there's a button here, and there's a bunch of wires, and it connects to pin 2. And we're also just injecting it. Not that I'm really going to do anything with it, but for, shits and gigs, I just put it in there in case I want to really debug something. Even though I got a ton of stuff hooked up to this breadboard right now, this is roughly what the schematic looks like. And the one thing I want to really point out, and this messed me up majorly when I started with this, is if you look at this, it's actually hooked up incorrectly. It's hooked up incorrectly because if you look, the 5 volts is actually being hooked up to the negative, or at least that's the negative on my board. That's the ground. So it's actually hooking up 5 volts to the ground, which it's hooked up backwards. So make sure when you're actually messing with this, that if they're saying this is where the power goes, double check your breadboard. Sometimes they're laid out a little differently, but for the most part, standard is plus and ground. So they kind of mess that up. So also, just in case this didn't work. So let's see how this works. All right, it's connected. So I should be able to push this button and things happen. It lights. That's amazing. I touched something, it lit up. Wait a second. I forgot. Do I have something else in here? Oh, yeah, if you hold it down, it'll blink. Yay. So there's also the hold functions on that. There's also different buttons. Like, there's all kinds of different switches, triggers that you can actually hook up to these things. This is where I started coming up with the idea that I am going to make a Nerf turret, and the Nerf turret didn't happen before this, so I'm sorry. But eventually I will make it work, and I'll post schematics, I'll do all this stuff, and everyone can just copy it, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and you can torture your coworkers like I plan to do. So just looking at it, and see if I can zoom in. People, nope, too far. Wait. There we go. All right, so what I've done up here is I set the range from 0 to 170 degrees, and I just want to do that so I don't, even though these servos are actually continuous, they can make a full 360. I want to put a range on it so I don't actually rip out the wires, which would be really bad. We got the pin, which is set to pin 9, and range is just inheriting that from there. We got the tilt, same deal, but that's hooked up to pin 10. And then we got joystick. And what's really nice about Johnny 5, and just like the touch screen that I was talking about before, they didn't have built-in plugins or integration or anything like that to it. And that's what they do. Like, they find really cool components. They build in native plugins so you don't actually have to go do everything manually. Same thing with this joystick. Sorry, joystick. There we go. So the joystick is hooked up to pins A0 and A1. A stands for analog. Wow, cracked voice. Awesome. So that stands for analog, and these are just analog inputs. So frequency is at 100, so that's just listening for every, I forget the total measurement for frequency on this, but it's basically every half second, or sorry, every 50 milliseconds is listening for a change on that event. So we're going to spit out into the console the X, Y coordinates, and hopefully this should work. You know, we should actually make the pan tilt work, which as of last night it didn't, and then this morning it did. So yeah, try it. So we got node, joystick, pan tilt. Sweet. Also, electrical tape works as an awesome stand. So got my little joystick here. Oh, snap. Oh, it's going all around. So what I also did was there is code for this in the repo for using SparkFun. SparkFun is a local company in Boulder, and they make some really cool, fun stuff. They have what is called the, it's a joystick shield. So you actually solder all the pins together. It's got the joystick. It's got 4 buttons to it, and I started messing with it for the Nerf turret. So the idea is I'll be holding the Arduino with that shield connected, have my joystick, and the firing mechanism. So that's kind of the idea for that. And as you can see, it spits out the XY coordinates, which I'm still trying to make sense of those values, so don't ask. So this is the basic layout. If you'll notice, they actually have this instead, like I just have the 5 volts going to it and the ground. That's a thing from SparkFun. It actually allows you to plug in an RC battery, so you don't need to have this plug. So what you do is you just buy like an RC battery from like any hobby store that has cars, planes, whatever. And you can actually hook that stuff right up to it. Also, just in case it didn't work, this is what my desk has looked like for over a month now. Just crap on it. So now we get to the real fun. So what I did was I set up an Express server that will actually hook up to this. So in theory, if you were to hook up like a Wi-Fi shield to this, connect your Arduino through Wi-Fi, you should, if you had access to some web app, you should be able to control that Arduino via the web wherever you are. So I didn't post the code in this mainly because there's just too much crap to it. For the love of God, please work. So you see it twitching around. All I did with that is that's just kind of my signal that everything was working, and I'm just telling the servos to do a sweep. So let's see if this worked. So we got localhost 3000. Cool. Hey, a demo that works. Crazy. This is what I do at 4 in the morning. And I'm holding it down and the LED goes nuts. Cool. But now that it's still working with that, I still hooked up some other things. So this is a pressure sensor, or sorry, a force sensor. So this is the hard part. It's going to be really hard for you guys to see it. So as I squeeze it, the harder I squeeze, the brighter the LED gets. So I just want to do it as kind of a, like, you can do this, but also still interact with it locally. You don't have to just keep it in the web. So that is, I am touching wrong buttons here. Not cool. There we go.
Now, just out of curiosity, is that using WebSockets for the communication?
It is using Socket.io. And all the code is posted in the repo. Like I said, send it out after this. So you can totally tinker with it. So, cool story, bro. Now what? So, what I've been tinkering with lately is a lot of like home automation things. Building my Nerf turret. I'm going to build a Nerf bot, or, well, actually, maybe a Nerf bot too. A node bot, which, I mean, you can buy actual bots, bot kits, make it yourself, and then you can hook up an Arduino Uno to it or whatever you want to hook up to it and start building up your own battle bots. Or, you know, SparkFun hosts the autonomous vehicles competition, which I went to, which was really amazing because people just have these RC cars that navigate this course, not always successfully, but some navigate the course successfully. People have been doing it to make like home arcades, Halloween costumes, art installations. You can even make 3D printers with these. Just use your imagination. So, I mean, like, I seriously had zero clue what I was going to build with these. I just knew this was something I wanted to learn. And as I started putting things together, started learning how sensors worked and just how those inputs actually get interpreted, I just have too many ideas now. So, I mean, that's also great. Like, if you go on, like, something like Inventables or something like that, there's tons of people that just start making some really crazy, awesome stuff with Arduinos. And, you know, you can just start stealing ideas. I mean, borrowing. So who's my dealer? So SparkFun, like I said, they're right here in Boulder. It's hour drive or whatever during rush hour, but their prices are pretty good. They have great ideas. Even if you bought a whole bunch of Arduino stuff from like a different company and just got on their forum, or even you can even call them up and they'll put you online with one of their technicians and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's this and this and this, how to hook it up. They're really big into open source. They're really big into just helping out the community. You can go take tours of this place. They're just really awesome people. 88 Fruit or Adafruit, I'm not really sure how to say it. They don't have a thing to tell me how to say it. What? Adafruit. Also, great products, great prices, usually really good availability. I know they have some that are a little bit exclusive to them, like they have some Game Shield that has a touch screen and all the stuff that hooks up right up to it. Thanks, Chandler, for telling me about that. Now I want one. Micro Center, it's convenient. It's not the cheapest, but you know, if you fry a circuit board on a Saturday, it's really easy to get there and buy a new one. Radio Shack, believe it or not, they actually still exist. You can still go there. I actually was there last week, and they still had no bots. They had all kinds of stuff that you can actually still buy and hook up to Arduinos. Didn't think that was still a thing. So I'm still trolling with Comic Sans, if anyone saw the panel talk before that. So feel free to ask questions. We can go through code. I'm actually a little early on this talk, I believe. Good. Said I was talking for 23 minutes, I think. They gave me too much time.
You have some kind of component that's, I don't know, unusual, and they don't have a, like, here's like .LED, or like, there's like objects for all these like components you're using. Is there ways to like go low level and like write one of those?
So, yeah, especially with Johnny 5, what's really good is if you have a schematic where you can even link them to the product where some of the spec sheets are, you can go into their community, post it, see if anyone has any ideas. They're cool enough to at least say, like, yeah, here's an idea, but you can also contribute to their framework, and they have like a base, like, here's how to make an LED plugin, or here's how to make whatever plugin. And they're more than welcome to just like, they'll review your code, they'll give you hints, tips, shit, they'll even write it for you sometimes. Or in most cases, they'll buy it and do it for themselves and then post it. So yeah, I mean, their documentation is actually really good. And once you actually start learning some of the fundamentals of just like, I know electricity goes in one end, ground comes out the other, input comes out here. You can start figuring out like, oh, it's an analog input. I put it into an analog thing, I trigger that thing, and you go, oh, this is the kind of data that's coming in. How do I interpret that? And even if you got that far, then you can start asking the forms that way.
Say you have no experience with Arduino whatsoever and you wanted to buy a starter kit.
Ah.
Is that not the way to go, or is it better to just buy one?
Totally the way to go, and that's one of the slides I forgot. No, there is a few things you can do. SparkFun has the Inventor's Kit. The Inventor's Kit comes with your breadboard, your SparkFun. It comes even with a book of just like how to start understanding Arduino, there's a bunch of code stuff, so if you really want to learn C, you can actually go through their setup on that way. Arduino themselves also offer their own starter kit, which is also really good. That's actually the one I went with. Usually comes with a few sensors, some servos, motors, pretty much anything you want to just start piquing your interest, and you'll start figuring out you're going to spend a lot of money once you get really interested in this. Also, I recommend if you're going to buy a soldering iron, actually buy one that's like $100 because getting the ones that are like $40, they're like 45 watts and they're just not enough power. Like I bought one that's now like 65 watts and it was $100 from SparkFun. It heats up like in less than 10 seconds. It is really awesome.
You showed the battery pack in the public, but so you can run it disconnected from the power source. Can you run Johnny 5 disconnected from your computer? Can you put that on the phone?
So in theory, yes. I haven't actually done it though. So that is one of the things I was hoping people wouldn't ask me. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, no, that's totally a very valid question because one of the things I was really wanting to do was like my bedroom gets really too hot. So what I'm planning on doing is taking an Arduino with some temperature sensors, maybe like just a few other weather sensors, figure out, oh, it's too humid in here, let's turn on the fan, let's turn on the AC because it's 80 in there even though it's 70 on the main floor. So just those kinds of things where I want to figure out, like, I want this self-standing thing, which I want to run Johnny 5, and that's one of the things that I still haven't figured out is just how do I do that, because, yeah, I mean, trying to keep a laptop hooked up to running a node server, that's not cool. It's an expensive sensor.
Use a Raspberry Pi or something to power it?
Yes, yes, the cool thing about Johnny 5 is not limited to Arduino. Oh, you got it. So you will have to find a different way to do it. Maybe you take a Raspberry Pi and install Johnny 5 on it. Yeah, you can install Johnny 5 onto an Arduino. I think they also support the BeagleBone, Spark.io, and I think they even had luck with the Tesla and Tesla 2. I believe so. And then back to your question about where you can, okay. So I guess if you can do it, there's got to be.
Flat out said if you want to do it, you have to
Well, that's a bummer. So, I mean, in that case, maybe you could start up your own nodes, which you can put your own node server onto, thank you, on a Raspberry. But at that point, I mean, you're like, what, $35 for that, $24 for an Arduino? It's way cheaper than putting your Mac up to it. May as well what? Well, where would be the fun in that? I hate you, Scat. Fermata?
Yeah.
So basically what you're doing is, Fermata is the protocol that actually communicates with the Arduino to your computer. So all it's doing is you're flashing the firmware that's on the Arduino. And then it just knows to open communicate to the laptop. It was because it was written by the same guy. Anyone else? Chandler?
Say there's a coworker sitting behind you at work, and you really wanted to annoy him. What components would I want to buy?
He's referring to me. You could have something that randomly shocks me at my standing desk. That would be funny. That and a pressure sensor? Yeah.
What were some of the pitfalls that you ran into and some common mistakes that you made?
Well, the common mistakes that I didn't know what the hell I was doing before I decided to give this talk. So what I end up doing is I'm like, I want to be the noob for everyone else, and I pick a talk that I want to learn about but I don't know about, and that's what I do. I try and find all those issues so you don't have to run into the same issues I did. And one of the biggest problems I found into is there's not a very, once you get outside of what is basically built in as plugins, like for the joystick and some of those other things that are pretty common, but when you start wanting to, tinker with some more advanced stuff, that's when you're going to have a very deep knowledge of Johnny 5, Node, and or Arduino, and just electronics in general. So it's pretty easy to get spun up. It's really easy to get dangerous. It's really easy to actually fall into something you thought would be easy. It's going to be super freaking hard. So that's just one of the things, and usually you won't find out until you're in the midst of it, like me with a touch screen and frying boards.
You tried, this is like total and probably maybe something you hate desoldering. Have you tried desoldering braid?
So I have desoldering wick, I have the vacuum, I have the... I just suck at it, man. Just give me a break. I followed like a ton of YouTube tutorials. I've taken a soldering class, and it's, it doesn't ever seem to be very easy for me. And like even the people who are trying to teach me are like, oh, it's super easy. Shit. They do the same thing where they seem to have difficulty doing it. After a lot of practice, I seem to be able to get it a little bit more and more. Sometimes the wick doesn't always work. Sometimes you need to use the vacuum. It just depends. I mean, I've never had good luck with it.
As long as you heard of that, I figured you were just trying to like heat it up and like.
I tried 4 brands too. They didn't make a difference. Thank you.